Hello there, welcome to Proper DIY. My name is Stuart Matthews and today I'm going to show you how I made this Mortise and Tenon door. As I only have a small workbench in the workshop, I decided I needed a temporary 8x4 table big enough to be able to lay out the door and the frame. I used my Stanley fold-in trestle legs with the straightest 3x2s I could find with a sheet of 12mm ply. I screwed the ply to all the timber supports at around about 300-ish centres and added a 4x2 trimmer beam at each end to ensure that they were aligned. As I wanted the table completely flat, I used my laser level to survey the top of the table. By rocking this measuring stick back and forth, it's easy to find the smallest value, which means the stick is vertical and the value is correct. By doing this in various places, I can shim the table to ensure it's 100% flat. I'm afraid this anal behaviour comes from my setting out days as a junior engineer on civil engineering building sites many years ago. It certainly is a cold one today. I think I'm wearing everything I own. There's nothing like carrying out projects in the middle of the winter in your garage with 6 inches of snow on the ground outside. But anyway, it's important we crack on with this one. So far I've set up this temporary table with some materials I'm going to be using for future projects, so there's no waste there. I think it's important that I've got a table big enough that I can lay out this door and also flat enough so there's no skew in it at all. You'll see that I've laid out this hardwood frame, and I bought this from Wickes a few days ago and it's around about the right size. It's a good price and it also comes with the seals and everything. It's almost impossible for me at the moment without a table saw to build a frame like this, so I thought I'd purchase it. Now this frame and the door is going to go into a hole in that wall there. Now, but I'm not going to cut the hole in that wall until I've at least got the frame and the door to plug it. So moving on to the door, the main construction around the perimeter of the door is going to be 6x2 timber, and this is just an offcut 6x2 timber, planes down to 44mm by about 140, 142. In the centre of that I'm going to be using these cladding boards, and this will give me this sort of vertical, traditional vertical Suffolk, Norfolk type door. Now these boards are going to be flush with the front of the frame, so I'm going to have to rebate this timber to accept these boards. Only once I've done that can I then think about doing the mortise and tenon joints top and bottom, and on top of that, moving along the belt and braces technique, I'm also going to put a diagonal brace on the inside to hopefully stop it racking in the future. So lots to do there. I think it's important that I cut down this timber now to the right size and start by doing lots and lots of rebating. I started by clamping the top and bottom rails together and sawing a shallow cut through both of them to fix the position of the tenon. As these rails are clamped together, everything I do here should be the same for both. I flipped these over and did exactly the same on the underside before marking out and cutting off the cheeks next to the tenons with a handsaw, always keeping on the waist side of the lines. I then moved on to cutting the stiles or the sides of the door to length. Before I do the rebates on the inside face of the door frame, I think that I need to just explain what I'm doing. This is an offcut of the door frame and I want to turn that into something that looks like that. The reason I want to do that is I've got cladding to go in the middle of the frame and I want cladding to go on the inside and outside and have something for the cladding to fix to. So I need to cut this face and this face. This depth here is the depth of the cladding, so it's all flush. This position here means that the cladding board, I'm going to have an exactly even number of boards across the door. If this position was either here or here, I'd end up having to cut cladding boards down. I don't want to do that. I want it to look even throughout. So I have to form that sort of shape. Now, normally, if you had a table saw, that would be fairly easy to do, and I haven't got a table saw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp the two styles together, and with my circular saw do a vertical cut here and here. Then I'll switch them around and do a vertical cut here and here. That means that I've got the vertical cuts done. I'll then lay it on the flat and do a cut here, but always staying on the waist side of the timber. So that's not the final profile. I'll then get my router, and referencing this outside edge of the door frame, I'll fix this cut here, and with the depth of the router set to the right depth, I'll form that face there. Then I'll turn it over and do exactly the same so it's symmetrical. Now that's an awful lot of work and an awful lot of sawdust. So right now I'm really regretting not having a table saw. Definitely clamping the two styles together made these vertical cuts a lot more stable. However, these deep long cuts really pushed my cordless circular saw to the limit. I then use my router with a guide referenced off the door edge on the right here to cut the final couple of millimetres off to achieve a parallel rebate edge. Once this edge was formed, I went freehand to remove the rest of the material down to the correct thickness. Then the same on the other side, times 2. This whole process was a real pain and took quite a bit of time, but I'm trying not to dwell on the table saw issue. As soon as I'd finished making this lovely accurate rebate, I started cutting chunks of it off, top and bottom, to allow the mortise and tenon joints from the rails to fit, which was really rather upsetting. So I'm just starting the mortise and tenon work, and I've just marked out the first mortise, although it does look a little bit close to the top of the door. There's only 20mm there, so I might just move it back 5mm. I'd rather have a smaller tenon and not blow out the top of the timber here rather than the other way around. So the way I'm going to be cutting this mortise is I'm going to start by using the router, and referencing off of one side, I'm going to drill a slot on the opposite side and then turn the router around, reference off this side and drill a slot here. That doesn't tell me exactly how wide it's going to be. I don't really care. It's going to be plus or minus 14mm. What it does do is it means it's absolutely centre between these two faces. The drill bits that I've got for the router are not deep enough to drill out this whole mortise, but at least it'll give me a good start to be able to finish that by hand, and it'll be dead vertical as well. When it comes to the tenon, I've already cut the perimeter of the tenon, and what I'll be doing is using the plunge router to take off some material at the top and then turn it around and take off material at the bottom and then try it. It should still be on the large side, so I'll keep doing that and gradually get deeper and make the tenon smaller and smaller until I get to the right fit. And once again, I don't really know how wide this is going to be. It's going to be around about 14mm. But if I take off the same amount on either side, referencing each face, it does mean the tenon's going to be exactly in the middle of this bit of timber. And if the mortise is exactly in this middle of this piece of timber, these should fit quite nicely. So that's the theory. Let's see if it works. I clamped a block of timber to the stile to give the router a bigger shelf to sit on for better stability. Although this did help, you'll see that a couple of times it still wobbled a little bit. My plan worked, and it meant I had two really nice vertical faces to work from to extend this mortise down to the correct depth. You'll see from the logo on the shaft of the chisel that I'm only using the absolute best tools on this build. This chisel is from that well-known tool maker, Wilko. This is the part of the build where that £300 mortising machine I saw at Machine Mart the other day now seems like quite a good deal. Just keep going. So essentially I'm down to depth now, although the last thing I've got to do is to trim the top and the bottom, which I've left large just on purpose. And I've got a little trick to help me do this, and essentially what you're looking for is to clamp a nice vertical piece of timber to your wood. You've now got a face that you can actually work down vertically, and that's going to help an awful lot to get a vertical cut, especially when you're essentially cutting through the grain, which is actually the hardest part of this job. So if I just bolt this on here, then at least I've got something, a guide to guide me vertically. I clamped down an offcut of the door frame here on the other side of the tenon, just to give the router some extra support while I cut the tenons to depth. The rule here is whatever I take off one side, I then take off the other without adjusting the router in any way. This is an iterative process that did take me some time, as each adjustment to the router was only tenths of a millimetre, as I didn't really want to overcut and end up with a loose, sloppy joint. After going around this circle a number of times, there becomes a point where putting the router to one side and trimming by hand feels safer and more controlled. Ooh, the eagle has landed. Once I managed to get each tenon to fit the mortise, I then needed even more hand trimming to actually tighten them up and make a respectable joint. The four main mortise and tenon joints, one on each corner, are now complete, and you would have just seen me tidying those up a little bit, and I've actually managed to get them nice and tight. And definitely my trick of coming from both sides with the router so everything's central absolutely worked, so I'm really happy about that. I've just dry fitted the door here into the door frame just so I can check on the size, and it's working out quite nicely. These blue shims are 3mm, so I've got 3mm either side. I've got 4 at the bottom. It's a little bit tight at the top, so I'm going to have to plane that down a little bit, but that's not going to be an issue. This is the hinge side, and I need 3mm on this side because these hinges that I've just bought, even when they're closed, have a 3mm gap all the way around. So that is why I need 3mm on that side. Hinges are going to go top, middle and bottom. Now after that, all I need to do is to fit this middle brace. This is going to be going in here. I'm going to mortise it either side, a fairly shallow mortise, because I've also got a lock to go in this area, and I don't really want the hole for the lock to be meeting up with the mortise. I want some sort of material in between them just for a bit of strength. Once that's in place and everything's glued up, I can use this board, and I'll use this as a diagonal brace here and then this section in here, because in the future, if the door wants to sag, this is the hinge side, it will want to go like this. This brace here will be in compression and hopefully stop it sagging at all. It'll definitely help out the mortise and tenon joints. It's a little bit belt and braces, but I don't want it to fall in the future. So a couple of things left to do there before we get on to the exciting part, which would be the glue up. I've just done another test fit, so I know that the door fits into the frame square and true. So now it's time for the glue up, which is always slightly stressful because there's like no turning back. And also I need to work fairly quickly because I've got quite a lot of edges on all these mortise and tenon joints. So once I start, I've just got to continue. I'm using Type Bond 3 with is an interior and exterior glue. So excuse me while I get on with this. It doesn't take too long before the glue to this many joints starts to really stiffen the door frame up and you lose the ability to make any adjustments. I used a couple of sash clamps to pull the joints together and then place the door back in the frame, going along the theory that even if the door isn't perfectly square, as long as it's the same shape as the frame, it should work. I routed a simple bevel on either side of the frame to match the TGV cladding detail, and then dry fitted the cladding boards and gave everything a really good sand. All of the exposed end grain on the door and the cladding boards I coated with a liberal dose of sealer before priming everything. During the final fixing, I used a bead of silicone around and between each cladding board to ensure the rain is kept out of the door. You can also see here that I've filled the internal 14mm void between the internal and outer cladding boards with polystyrene insulation, just to help cut down the noise and heat loss. So after all that routing, all that sawdust and all that mortise and tenon work, the door is finally complete and I've installed it as well. And I must say it's come out better than I thought. It's absolutely solid. I love this little fluting detail, and the grey that matches the house I think is great. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on my channel, which are projects all around the house and garden. And if you're feeling really brave, please subscribe. So from another job done, I'll see you next time.